Right. Good to be with everybody this evening. I did want to let you know a couple of things. One, this is going to be my last class teaching of the quarter. Next week will be Zach, and then with Christmas we have a special schedule the following week. But today, so Mike filled in last week, me today, Zach next week. That's where I was supposed to be. So today we're going to be talking about Revelation 12 and Satan presented as the dragon and when he is cast out of heaven. So if you want to follow along or read ahead or before to verses that I don't put up there, Revelation 12 is probably a good place to start. We're going to be doing a few things. So we'll be looking at the Revelation 12 account. We'll be studying just briefly, and I know that's a dangerous word to say in Revelation, is briefly, but we're going to be looking at the context briefly. And then also we'll be talking about the spiritual warfare that's going on there in Revelation 12. Then also I want to look at Satan's sins, and Satan's sins that are presented to us as his and not as ours, meaning not that we are not sinful, but that we are not to be after Satan as our father or mimicking Satan. We are to be after our Father God. And even though we won't hold up to it on our end of the bargain, we ought to always be striving to be sinless. And then also I want to look at the necessity for us to focus on God's will and hyphen the gospel, and I'll use those interchangeably. And rather that it's important that we don't get distracted by what is going on around us. So the devil's cast out of heaven. In Revelation chapter 12, we'll start in verses 7 through 9. And there was war in heaven, Michael and his angels waging war with the dragon. The dragon and his angels waged war, and they were not strong enough. And there was no longer a place found for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. All right. Briefly, talk about the context. So, if we think about Revelation, and the part of Revelation that we are concerned with contextually starts in chapter 4. And that's really where the scene from chapter 12 begins, is chapter 4. In Revelation chapter 4, John sees an open door into heaven. And he says, called, and immediately he was in the Spirit, and he is called up into the throne room of God. He's taken up into the throne room. And there he beholds the one that is sitting on the throne, and he is glowing or shining like jasper and sardius. These are two stones that we find on the breastplate of the high priest that are representing the 12 tribes of Israel. Depending on which version you have, sardius might, if you read in Exodus chapter 28, sardius might be pronounced as sardius, or it might just say ruby. Jasper is at least quartz. It might also include other opaque stones. But if you think about what glowing like quartz and ruby means, it's glowing like white and red, okay? So some people are saying that this is a symbol of God's wrath and his righteousness, but regardless, glowing as white and red. Also, there are 24 elders that are wearing gold crowns, that are sitting on their own smaller thrones surrounding God who's sitting on the throne, along with 4 living creatures who are continually worshiping God. That is a lion, an ox, a man, and an eagle, that are saying, holy is God Almighty, who was and is to come. Maybe that sounds like a song. Still in the same scene, Revelation chapter 5, John then sees God, the one sitting on the throne, holding a scroll with 7 seals on it, and there is nobody present, there is nobody as they look around that is found worthy to open it and to break the seals. This makes John sad. Then later a lamb who is slain is revealed as the one that is worthy, and he begins to break the seal, or he puts himself forward as worthy, and then they begin to worship him. In chapter 6, the Lamb breaks the first 6 seals. The first 6 seals do a lot of things. Number 1, the white horse of conquest is coming out, and it says that they come to conquer, and they do conquer. The second seal is broken. A red horse brings forth war. The third seal is a black horse that brings forth famine. The fourth seal is behold a pale horse and brings forth death and hell or Hades. The fifth seal reveals the martyrs who are crying for justice. The sixth seal brings about an earthquake, and then I wasn't sure how to say it, so I said cosmic disturbances. It's the sun and the moon are those things are the disturbances, and also God's wrath comes. Revelation 7, 144,000 individuals from various tribes of Israel are sealed with God's sign on their forehead, while 4 angels are holding back the destructive winds that are getting ready to be set free on the earth. And it's like, hang on, we got to seal God's elect first. So before they're allowed to come destroy, the 144,000 are sealed. And then there's an innumerable multitude. I'm sorry for my typo. I didn't catch it till after I'd already saved it. That's not how you spell innumerable, I know. But they are all clothed in white, and they come and they are praising God in his throne room. In chapter 8, the 7th seal is broken. There's silence in heaven for half an hour while 7 angels prepare to sound 7 trumpets that they are given. Then they start sounding them. The first 4 trumpets with their sound that brings destruction on 1/3 of the earth, 1/3 of the sea, 1/3 of the rivers, and also the fixtures of the sky, like the sun and the moon and the stars. And then in Revelation 9, the 5th trumpet brings locusts up from the bottomless pit or the abyss to torment all those who are on the earth without the seal of God on their foreheads. The 6th trumpet brings the release of 4 previously bound angels who lead an army of 200 million and kill 1/3 of the humans that remain on the earth that are not one of the ones that are wearing God's seal. And despite all of these horrible judgments, the humans on earth still will not repent. Revelation 10, a mighty angel descends out of heaven to earth with a small scroll and holding a small scroll, and John is instructed to eat it. He is warned that it will, and then later when he does it, it does taste like honey in his mouth, but it makes his stomach bitter. In Revelation chapter 11, 2 witnesses of God prophesy for 1,260 days. Then they are killed by the beast, but are resurrected and ascend to heaven. Then the 7th trumpet sounds, declaring the kingdom of the world has become God's kingdom. And then we pick up where we read in Revelation 12. Right before the verses that we read, there is a woman who is clothed by the sun. She gives birth to a male child, and a red dragon tries to devour the child, but fails. Then Michael and his angels wage war against the dragon and his angels and cast him to earth. When on earth, the dragon pursues the woman, but is thwarted, and turns his attention instead to the descendants or offspring of the woman who are not obeying God. All right, briefly, I think I did a pretty good job. So we pick up. So we're still in that scene. Remember where we started in chapter 4. John is called up to the throne room of God. And from there, he starts witnessing all of these things. I've heard say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I don't know, I didn't count. Maybe that was 1,000. I didn't feel like it. But I asked AI to give me a picture of Revelation chapter 4 through Revelation chapter 12, but I wanted it to focus on chapters 4, 9, and 12. And I wanted to make sure that it included the spiritual warfare and the 24 elders surrounding God's throne. And this is what it gave me. And there's a few things on there. And the only reason that I wanted to show this to you is just to say that even when you give it pretty specific instructions, it doesn't do a very good job. I told it to obey the words exactly, but you notice that none of the elders there in the back are sitting on thrones like they're supposed to be. Neither is the one sitting on the throne. But it's got the locusts creeping up. I'm not sure why the horses are split on sides either. So there's a few things, but I thought that was interesting, its attempt to create that image for me. All right, so back in Revelation 12, caught up contextually. I want to focus on that phrase there in verse 8. So the dragon and his angels are waging war, and they were not strong enough, and there was no longer a place found for them in heaven. Language like this always strikes me. You find it every once in a while in the Bible. It's as if they were looking for a place for Satan in heaven, right? Like God was trying to. It reminds me of Daniel. In Daniel chapter 5, 26 through 28, so this is when King Belshazzar is having his feast, and then the hand comes in and starts writing on the wall. And Daniel's going to interpret it for him. And starting in verse 26, he says, this is the interpretation of the matter. Mene, God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. And so if we think about what that says, that God has numbered the days of your kingdom. You have been measured and found wanting. It's that phrase really is what reminded me. I thought of that phrase for the dragon. That, oh man, shucks, we were looking for a spot, we just couldn't find one for you. And so instead, he's sent to cast down to earth. Let's see here. So just like Belshazzar's kingdom was given to the Medes and the Persians when he wasn't able to hold up to his weighing or measuring, so too was Satan. Satan was measured. He was waged in war. He was measured in war, and he was not strong enough to contend with the archangel Michael and the angels that were following him. So also was Satan unable to measure up or live up to God's will, like the other angels, like Michael did. So he was weighed and found wanting himself. Revelation chapter 12, a verse that we didn't read, verse 12, says, "Therefore rejoice, O heavens, you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short." This is something that we ought to remember while we're going through on this earth. Our God is real, and his promises are true and accurate. But also what is real is the devil, is God's enemy. And God's enemy, we as children of God, is also our enemy. And while we are on this earth, thank goodness, thank God that we do not have to hold to this earth as our home. That I don't have to believe that I'm going to be continuing on with the pain that I know in this life and that is what I have for eternity. Instead, I can hope for heaven. But while I am here, I ought not be surprised because the devil is here too. I want to look at the devil's sins and how they ought not to be our own. Let's look here. So in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, that be is mine. It's just the very end of verse 2, just for context. But really I want to look at verse 3 and 4. To the effect that the day of the Lord has come, let no one deceive you in any way. For that day will not come unless the rebellion comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. The devil has always been a usurper. He desires God's position for himself. We look at that and we sum it up as pride. Pride better be something that we are always on the lookout for and guarding against in our own life. If you ever feel like you are thinking more highly of yourself than you ought to think, if you ever feel like your natural reaction is to think less of others, then be very careful. The pride of Satan is part of the reason that he was not able to stay in God's graces, that he desired to usurp and to, instead of taking his own position, he wanted to take God's position for himself, exalt himself above. A couple other passages on pride in Psalm 10 and verse 4. In the pride of his face, the wicked does not seek him. All his thoughts are, there is no God. The culture that we have around us today, it's dangerous for people that don't believe in God. One of the things that is probably the most dangerous is not just their absence of belief, but their belief that there doesn't need to be a God, that there doesn't need to be anything greater than them. How awesome do they think they are? And that's probably one of the biggest faults there is in atheism, is they believe how humans or themselves are this higher being. Also in Proverbs chapter 16 and verse 18, pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. We look at Satan and we look at his perverted confidence that he had before his destruction, and it is that same confidence that he was trying to spread to Adam and Eve and other places that we've looked in this in this class this quarter, where he's trying to spread that pride or arrogance to those around him. The second one I want to look at is deception and lying. In John chapter 8 and verse 44, it says, "You are of your father, the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character, for he is a liar and the father of lies." That lying tongue, that deceitful tongue, and we talked about it in some of my previous classes, but oftentimes the most dangerous lies are the ones that he tells that are partial truths, because they're the hardest ones or harder ones to notice. Then let's look in Ephesians chapter 4. "Therefore, having put away falsehood, let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and give no opportunity to the devil." I like the connection between putting away falsehood in our speech and anger. Some of the hardest times it is for me to be perfectly honest is when I'm angry, when I let emotions get the better of me, because I'm always defensive, and I want to defend whether it's an action that I took or an opinion that I have or whatever it is. If I get angry, then immediately I want to start defending, being on the defensive. And when I'm defensive, I want to defend myself. And when I'm defending myself, I don't think very clearly about what I'm doing. All that I think about is victory. I need to convince this guy that I'm right. That's the same thing I believe that Paul's here warning us against. That if we want to put falsehood away from us, then we need to make sure that we are putting anger away from us. Remember to not hold yourself as too important that people can't sin against you. Let's instead focus on our position that is below God, that we should be welcoming even to those that have wronged us so that we can serve our Father better. One more lies. 1 John chapter 3, verses 7 through 10. Little children, let no one deceive you. Whoever practices righteousness is righteous, as he is righteous. Whoever makes a practice of sinning is of the devil, for the devil has been sinning from the beginning. The reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the works of the devil. No one born of God makes a practice of sinning, for God's seed abides in him, and he cannot keep sinning, because he has been born of God. By this it is evident who are the children of God, and who are the children of the devil. Whoever does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor is the one who does not love his brother. One of the scariest things to consider is I know better than anybody all of the shortcomings that I have in my life, and my sins are in front of my face continually. And man, how scary it is to think, who am I serving when I don't obey God, when I fall short? When I sin, then I am aligning myself with Satan. I ought always to be running from sin and be excited to get away from it, no matter how pleasurable or enticing it may seem at the time. It's something that I should not let enter my life. We'll probably spend a little bit longer in this section than the other two. I want to look back at our passages that we read, and I want to think, you can see how this class is shaping up. I don't just want to look at Satan's fall from heaven and look at it academically. I'm wanting to see how we can practically put it in our lives. And there's a few things there's one passage in Revelation specifically that I find very interesting that talks about this idea. So back in Revelation chapter 5 and verse 4. So remember the brief context that we got on Revelation. So here we are in chapter 5. This is after John has been called up to the throne room. He is now standing there looking at the one on the throne, that is God, holding the scroll with the 7 seals. And they are looking for someone worthy to break the 7 seals and open the scroll. And should say 2 through 4. It only says 4. But starting in verse 2, there in Revelation chapter 5. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals?" And no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or look into it. And I began to weep loudly, because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or look into it. So right after this, one of the elders, clothed in white with a crown, comes to John and basically reassures him and says, "Don't worry, the Lamb's going to do it." But I want to focus on this part right here. John is called up, and here he is. He's witnessing all of this transpire in the throne room of God in heaven. I'm not sure if he's being literally true, but John says he was taken up in the Spirit. So maybe it wasn't just a dream or a vision. He might have been actually spiritually brought up. That's at least what it seems to say. I haven't studied the language enough to know for sure. But there John is, and he's witnessing this happen, and he weeps. Why would he weep? That's strange to me, especially if he has any inclination of what is getting ready to come, because opening this scroll, breaking these 7 seals, brings about all of that destruction that we talked about in those first 3 slides after I introduced. It brings about the destruction of a third of the earth. It brings about a destruction of a third of the sky. It brings about a destruction of a third of the humans that are on the earth. It brings about that army of locusts out of the abyss, and they go out, and their only good job, they're told you're not allowed to kill anybody. All you're doing is you are tormenting everybody, but you can't kill anybody. So it brings these locusts that have the bodies of horses with armor on, and they got heads of humans and hair of females, and then it also brings about the angels and the winds and the destruction of the wrath. It brings about the trumpets after the 7th seal is broken, and each one of these trumpets has a new thing that it destroys. But even though all of this is what we had to go through, what John was getting ready to see us go through, he is still sad. He's not distracted by it. He is sad that God's will can't be done. After the 7th seal is broken, after the 7th trumpet is sounded, right after God's 2 witnesses die, after they prophesy for 1,260 days, and they die in a city in a great city that is called, mystically says it's called Sodom and Egypt, but then it's also where their Lord was crucified, so maybe Jerusalem. But after that trumpet, it is sung with praise that God's kingdom is now man's kingdom. God's kingdom and man's kingdom are now one, and the authority of God's Christ has come. John is focused steadfastly through all of the horrible things that he witnesses. He is focused on God's will coming. So also in Luke chapter 10. So in Jesus's ministry, he sends out the 70 disciples, and remember, he sends them out to villages ahead of him where he is getting ready to go, and he gives them instructions on what they're supposed to do with the dust of their sandals and things like that. But then after it, they come back, and let's read verses 17 through 20. The 72 returned with joy, saying, "Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name." And he said to them, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Behold, I have given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you. Nevertheless, do not rejoice in this, that spirits are subject to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven." I see a very similar focus that Jesus is calling his disciples to here. Don't get distracted with the good things that you think you have. It's new. You've never been in charge of evil spirits before, but don't get distracted by it. Instead of rejoicing in that, rejoice that you are God's children. Rejoice that your name is found in heaven. And so, with the two, I again will just connect them and say, how important is it for us to remain focused on God's will, to remain focused on the gospel, no matter what hardship comes our way, as we see in Revelation, but also no matter what goodness or blessing comes our way, as we see here a potential distraction for the disciples in Luke. In Romans chapter 8, verses 5 and 6, it says, "For those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh. But those who live according to the Spirit set their minds on the things of the Spirit. For to set the mind on flesh is death, but to set the mind on the Spirit is life and peace." When we are here on this earth, let's remember that it doesn't matter what difficulties may come. It doesn't matter what luxuries or blessings come to us. We ought always to seek to set our minds on God and His will for us, and we will be found as those that are spiritual. I think I was a little bit too brief with my recollection here of Revelation. Are there any comments or questions? Shelby, Jerry's getting a mic.
This is just kind of interesting to me, and I don't know how to kind of put it together in my thoughts, but in the 12th chapter, you was reading war in heaven, and Satan was cast down out of heaven. You go to the 21st chapter of Revelations, and it talks about heaven, that there is no more death, no more sorrow, no more pain, no more hurting, no more devil is not there. How, at one point in time, was the devil evidently in heaven, and now when we go up to heaven, the devil will not be there?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that I spent quite a bit of time on, the timing of it. Because on the one hand, we have the devil as the serpent in the garden, down on earth at creation. On the other hand, we have in Job, especially if you take it a little bit more literally, we have the devil being free to go to and fro back up into God's throne room. Also in Luke, Jesus says that when he sent out his disciples, he witnessed, he says, "I was watching the devil fall from heaven like lightning," is what he says. But then also in Revelation, we are told that it seems in Revelation 12, that chapter that we were reading mostly in, that the woman gives birth to the child, the devil tries to kill the child, and then after the child is called up back into heaven, so after Jesus' resurrection, that is when Satan was cast down to earth, or at least after that is when he was cast down to earth. But then, and so anyway, I will say that I don't think that there is any way we can claim to know, based on the passages in Scripture, when exactly it happened. But because, especially Revelation 21, we know the New Jerusalem, the heaven that's coming, is not going to have any torment. We know from Revelation 12 that there was no place found in heaven for Satan, so we know he won't be there. We don't know if he already isn't there, I think, is what it is. Yeah. What else? There.
You mentioned the idea of John weeping because God's will wasn't being fulfilled. I think there might also be another way to look at that that's complementary, that man always wants to know what's coming next. What does our future hold?
Yeah.
And for all of us, that future is hidden. We don't know the time and place of our death. There's just so many things about life that are uncertain. And so I think John might also be weeping over uncertainty. Uncertainty of, will God's will be fulfilled? What is going to happen? Mm-hmm. And can't someone tell me what's going to happen? But of course, then the seals are opened, and by Christ gives the power to reveal what is going to happen. And of course, it's victory and salvation for man.
Yeah, that's great. Well said. Thank you. John? Oh, yeah, Dave.
I'll beat John to this since he's waiting for the microphone. Last year, Anita and I had the privilege and were blessed to be able to attend the lectureships at Fried Hardeman, which was on the book of Revelation. So we listened through nearly 40 different lessons on the book of Revelation. And here's the quote that I took away at the end. The only question that's really important is your name written in the book of life.
Yeah, amen.
And we can argue over all day,
Everything
all
else.
this stuff, you know, what does this mean? What does that mean?
Yeah.
The only thing that's really important is your name in the book of life.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. John?
Yeah, whenever this topic comes up about, Satan being cast down from heaven, I wonder sometimes if I'm, or if there are a lot of other, established traditions or beliefs, because I get the impression that you talk to other people and they're like, oh yeah, I know exactly how it all went down. And it has me curious about other traditions that are out there. I don't know if there are Jewish traditions. I even get the feeling that maybe sometimes some of the people, the biblical authors maybe knew some of these other traditions. But I did want to call out one other thing from Revelation 12. You talked about verse 12, but I was looking at like 10 and 11 as well. In verse 10, it says, of Revelation 12, I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation and power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down. I think it's interesting he talks about, the accuser again, who accuses them day and night before our God. Verse 11, and they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they love not their lives even unto death. So the fact that it's, conquered through the blood of the Lamb, it seems to, I know timelines are not, exact things, but that seems to be like, post-crucifixion, or at least impacted by the crucifixion.
Yeah, and I think that's also like the lamb was already slain when he starts to open the seals, and so yeah, that's good. Thanks for that context as well. Anything else? All right, guys. Hey, thank you very much. About 2.5 minutes early, so enjoy your extra chat time.